Okay, Matt Laughlin here with another episode of Heroic. I am once again thrilled to get to interview our guest today. Another incredible story. And why don't I go ahead and just introduce this? This gentleman sitting before me, Eric Hess, shouldn't be here. I mean, if you ask the doctors based on our initial conversations, it's kind of miraculous he's alive, much less achieve some of the levels of health, fitness that he did after an incredible, tragic accident as a 22-year-old man. So we'll certainly ask Eric a little bit about his life today. He's a father, married, has 2 children in the home with his wife and Shar. Beautiful family. He's got kind of a multifaceted career. He manages, how old are you, Eric?
46.
46. So, but we're going to start back when he was 22 years old, and we'll start there. You were. Why don't we start there? You were working
Sure.
at the time. You lived in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
So what were you doing at that time? To, I guess, paint a brief tapestry of your life then, and then tell us what happened.
Sure. I was working for an excavating company back in Pennsylvania. We were working in a job in Bainbridge, Pennsylvania, putting in a pipeline. And my job at the time was to put together fittings for this pipeline and then hand them down into about a 20-foot ditch that we had dug. There was a backfill crew that was backfilling the ditch as we were laying the pipe, and a crew that was digging the ditch open, of course.
So like an ongoing operation.
Exactly.
Digging
yeah.
more, laying more, kind
Yep.
of a, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
The road was the only place that you could maneuver. On one side was a big trench with stone piles for the backfill, and on the other side of the street was all the dirt that they were digging out and all the material. So on the street itself was the big machine that was digging, a big track hoe machine that was digging this ditch, and then all the dump trucks lined up that were taking the excess material and moving it out. So it's just a constant, looked like a train of dump trucks moving through the street. But unfortunately, we all had to work in a very confined space, and I was kneeled down pretty close to one of the dump trucks that was being loaded at the time. And the process was, once the truck was loaded, they beeped the horn, telling the driver that he was loaded, and then he started to go. I had my back to the truck when the truck that was behind me was told that he was full, and he started to pull ahead.
Oh.
So he hit me in my back with the bumper of a big Mack dump truck.
Wow.
Which was 56,000 pounds. They had weighed it fully loaded, and it was on asphalt. So he hit me in the back, and I fell over and flipped over real quick. And
Onto your back, yeah.
Onto my back, yeah. So I'm looking up at the sky and realized that what had happened, and I grabbed a hold of the bumper of this Mack dump truck.
Yeah.
So he started dragging me. I was going very, very slow because he just started moving. But my boot got stuck under the front tire. So he started driving up on that leg and caught my other leg as well. So I'm laying parallel with the truck, and he just started driving up my feet, calves, knees, made it the whole way up to about my waist, a little bit above my waist, when the driver noticed somebody on the backfill crew come running down the road waving his hand, stop, stop, stop. And of course the driver didn't know what he did. It was,
he didn't detect anything.
He wouldn't feel anything with that much weight in that big of a vehicle.
Yeah.
So he instantly started backing off. And I was conscious during the whole thing. So I remember everything very vividly.
Yeah. When we originally spoke, it sounds like it's like you remembered moment to moment the whole
everything. Yeah.
Well, like you made a remark that it was almost like you watched like your body in like a wave of flesh and bone.
Yeah, it's exactly. I looked down at, and it looked like looking out in the ocean, big waves coming in. That's what my flesh looked like, and it was kind of rolling up towards my waist. And I remember at the time thinking, boy, I better move my head out of the way because this isn't stopping. And it was
Yeah.
really surreal. It didn't seem real
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
And I don't remember any pain from the time.
Was there, do you recall pain in that moment? Or was
Nothing. I don't remember any pain. Your body shuts that out when you
it at that
deal with
level of
something
trauma?
like that.
Yeah. No pain, just surreal unfolding. And
Yeah. And I thought I was going to die.
yeah.
I remember moving my face, but thinking I can't get out of this.
When you, yeah. How long did that sense like, this is it? Was that basically the thought, I'm dying now? Or,
Yeah.
And then it stopped. What happened then when he backed off you? Yeah.
As he backed off, I was able to move my head a little bit, and I remember looking down, and I just remember seeing my pelvis was kind of opened up. That if my legs they would be spread out, but my right leg was completely folded over and beside my left leg, and I remember seeing the white of my femur sticking out. So it was out through the bands that I had on at the time, and I couldn't move anything. I could move my arms a little bit, but
yeah.
I couldn't move anything from my chest down.
Wow.
And then just the chaos starts. People running around and people standing over me, and
they themselves in shock, probably.
Yeah.
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 So at this time of your life, just for context, you're 22 years old.
Yep.
And you were, and this has to do with your kind of incredible turnaround. At that time, you were training for your first. Was it a bodybuilding competition or powerlifting? I can't remember.
That was a bodybuilding show. It was the very first day that I was going to start the diet. I think it was 12 weeks from that particular date.
Oh, got it. The cutting diet, but you had already you're 230 pounds, if I remember, physically fit.
Yeah. Luckily, I had a lot of muscle mass, and that's one of the things that saved me, having that much muscle
structure.
Mass. Yeah.
So what happened? So take us from people gathering around you. What happened then?
Well, then they were talking about, of course, I'm headed to the hospital, and they were trying to get the helicopters that were able to deal with that type of trauma, and the hospital that they wanted to take me to, because it was a decent drive. They were all being utilized, so they had to take me by ambulance, which, if I recall, was about a 40-minute drive to the trauma hospital where they took me.
Were you in shock then? Were you lucid or aware at that point? Or?
Oh, I still know everything that happened. I remember they were starting to, inject me with morphine or whatever pain medication they used at the time.
Yeah.
But I remember everything very vividly, and one of the most clearest sounds that I'll always remember was the being in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, talking to the paramedic. And I heard this metal on metal tapping that if you just took a pen and tapped it on a metal lid, tap, 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 tap. And I said, "What is that noise?" And he said, "Well, that's the other nurse or paramedic. They're using a scalpel and they're scraping stones out of your backside and your leg, and they're just hitting the bottom of the ambulance." But it was such a crystal clear sound that I'll never forget that.
Yeah. Surreal. And so they got you to what hospital did they take you to?
It would have been Lancaster General back there. They were the only hospital to deal with that level of trauma. So they were ready to go. When I got there, they wheeled me into the very first part of the emergency room, and everybody that was going to be involved, they were starting to gather there. And I, saw my parents, they were already there.
What was that like?
I knew it was serious what was going on.
By their faces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were the room was completely filled with people, and that would seem so strange to me that there'd be that many people
that quickly
dealing with one thing.
Oh, in terms of the physicians and surgeons and staffing.
Yeah, there were so many people in that room getting ready for stuff, and so then they had to wheel me for X-rays first because they were assuming that there was internal damage with this thing that had just happened to me. And that's when I really remember the pain happening from them having to move me to try to take X-rays, and them lifting me up on my side, and hundreds and hundreds of X-rays to get all different angles, I guess, of everything they needed to see.
Oh my goodness!
And then, next thing I was in the operating room.
And what was you'd mentioned when we spoke previously, there was like multiple surgical experts on hand to try to figure out how to put you back together kind of
They
thing?
had, I believe there's 2 or 3 orthopedic surgeons, the primary, then they had a plastic surgeon involved, I believe, and then the pulmonary doctors, and, everybody has their specialty because they didn't know what they were going to find
Yeah.
with what had happened.
Yeah, and to give a sense of the scope of injury, like what did they find?
Well, afterwards I found out that, actually, it wasn't until much later that I found out I actually had a fracture in my spine too, but it was a fracture in my spine. I had 6 breaks in my pelvis. Both of the sockets in my pelvis were completely shattered.
Wow, like your hip socket just shattered.
You couldn't recognize my x-ray. Looking at an x-ray, you would never know what you're looking at. It looked like a spider web.
That's incredible.
I had a compound fracture in my femur. Both of my tibias were broken, and my left ankle, I think, they were all broken.
You mentioned, I remember you recall seeing your boots that went under the vehicle.
Yeah, so you have steel toe boots you're wearing when you do a job like that, and I remember somebody days later in the hospital room bringing my boots in, and I'm just saying, hey, I thought you'd be interested in seeing this, and they showed me my boots, and the steel was just smashed flat.
Oh my God!
And my toes were still attached to my feet, so I don't know how
that
I don't know
worked.
if the boot was ripped off my foot, but it was pretty crazy seeing a steel toe boot just smash flat, and my foot was okay.
And what were the in terms of your understanding of the magnitude of the injury and the prognosis and the early discussions? What was that like?
Well, I think I spent about, I'm not sure if it was maybe a week in the intensive care, and then they moved me to a more normal upstairs room in the hospital for the beginning stage of the recovery. And there was talk about possible amputation of my one leg because the damage was so bad. It was just crushed so bad. The blood flow wasn't there just from being crushed, everything crushed. And I looked down for many, many days, maybe even into the weeks, and my body was black from my chest down. Everything was just black. I remember seeing it.
Oh, wow. Everything must have been totally black.
Everything was. And I remembered seeing the imprints of tire tread going down through my waist and my stomach down to my thighs. That you could just see those little zigzag lines if you think of a big dump truck tire, and you could see that imprinted on my skin for the longest time.
Wow. So there was, how did you process that first, say, week or so in terms of when they're saying, we're concerned we may lose your leg, and were they was there discussions of whether would you ever walk again? I mean, I've never, you hear people go through a tragic diagnosis or calamity, and they get a prognosis.
Sure.
Communicated to them, and it's such a sensitive thing to I imagine, for a physician to deliver a thing like that, but in how it's received. So what was that process and discussion like in that first week or two? Were you coherent or drugged up, or were you able to?
Sure. I was on a morphine drip that I could do it. So things were a little blurry in and out. I don't remember anybody being very encouraging, any of the doctors, except for one particular doctor that worked on me.
Wow.
And
what did he or she say, or what?
Well, he basically said he was the orthopedic surgeon that was in charge of my operation. To some extent, I remember him saying that, you can survive this if you want to. Wow. You're going to determine the outcome of this. And everybody else was going by maybe history of similar accidents that happened. So they were talking about having to replace my joints, and it's probably going to happen within the next 5 years, and both my hips would need done, my knees would be replaced. Probably not going to be walking. You're definitely not going to exercise again. Definitely not bodybuilding or powerlifting again.
Wow.
So I started to get pretty angry with that, hearing, some people tell me what's going to happen to me.
Yeah. It was it like a fired up sort of, you said angry, like, that violated you, like your dignity or freedom or something. Like how would you describe that? Because you said when we first met and discussed this that you came to a place where there was no other option but recovering from this. Like,
yeah. Later after the accident, I've, had some time to start healing.
Yeah.
People would come up numerous times and say, well, how did you come up with the willpower to survive that? Or how did you fight that? And, the whole time through it, I never saw it as an option of giving up. It was never, I never even thought of just, throwing my hands up and deciding, that laying in this bed is going to be the outcome for me.
It just evoked pure fight and curiosity.
Yes. Yeah. Like, determination just came up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perseverance.
Did that become, it's amazing. Like, I'm thinking of my own example in terms of, I remember I ran college track and cross country, and I can't wait to ask you shortly here about, reveal to the audience some of your, kind of the scope of your physical recovery and your accomplishments. But I remember just even I had a couple ankle surgeries in my 20s, and I wasn't fiercely like gonna, I allowed myself to get kind of bummed about that, like the limitation of mobility, and worried about the future consequences of my health. And I think part of it was, having worked as a therapist, I now can look back and see how people can very much identify with an activity or a hobby, and the possible loss of that could be depressing, In your case, you're a fit young guy training for your first competition, and your body's just obliterated. And how did that, in terms of did it become like a one-dimensional focus where your thoughts, your feelings, your game plan was just on recovering from this? Or what dominated your mind in those initial weeks? And I think, might have been a while before you were wheeling around in a wheelchair, but you'd shared a memory, about seeing somebody jog by you while you were in a wheelchair.
Yeah. So there was I believe it was about 8 weeks I had to lay flat in a bed. I couldn't even sit up. And that time before the accident, I was just getting ready to move into an apartment building. But obviously after the accident, I moved into my father's home, which is a ranch, 1 story, where I could eventually use the wheelchair and get around the house, and, getting the aid. And they just set a hospital bed up in my father's home. And so there's a few things that happened in that time frame, that 8-week period. And the 8 weeks was pretty boring. I couldn't do anything.
Number of surgeries, rods put in your body, kind of thing.
Well, the initial surgery, they put all of the hardware in, which came out to be a rod down my femur, I believe 17 screws and 2 plates, a plate down the full length of my tibia and one in my ankle, and about 17 screws then. So a lot of hardware. And then the only other surgery that I needed was to have that hardware taken out about 18 months later.
Wow. So even your pelvis being broken in 6 places, your hip sockets shattered. How did that heal?
Well, luckily, because I did have the muscle mass back then, the muscle held the form of the pelvis, so they didn't have to put me in a body cast for that. I just wasn't able to move. I had a cast on each leg, but the pelvis kind of held itself in place for the healing process.
So just your physical health and vitality, that structure.
Yeah.
So you're gradually starting to move again, get into a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And at your father's house, like what did you make a decision that you'd compete in bodybuilding again, or what did that long road look like for you?
Oh, I knew I would.
See, there it is in your voice. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the most probably surreal memories that I have of the experience was when I first started being able to do any level of exercise. I was getting in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
And then I started doing basically laps in my father's circular driveway. And
wheeling yourself around.
wheeling myself around, just starting to do some upper body movements, just moving this wheelchair. And I remember getting out to the point of my father's driveway, and he lived up on top of a hill, so he had a nice view and beautiful countryside. And I remember just taking a little break out at the end of the driveway and watching a runner run on the road that my father's driveway was on. And just, it really dawned on me then that, I'm so lucky to be alive. This guy's out running, and that just the freedom of being able to do that, and that could end in a split second. And I was lucky to be given that option to possibly get myself to that point where I could do something like that. Just surviving that accident, that was just
it all came to you in that, like
it did, yeah.
How remarkable it was that you were even there in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
And then how precious a healthy life, how precious a life is, or the movement, and like precious. Is that almost?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
You learn really fast not to take things for granted. Not to take things for granted.
So did you eventually, what was the process from that to walking to even, lifting weights again? Like, how did that unfold for you?
So my rehab started moving pretty fast. I got into an aquatics program, which really helped. But so once I was able to sit up in a wheelchair, then I progressed pretty quickly. And your body will start healing faster. Once you can start using it, it heals fast. Spent, from what I can recall, a couple of weeks maybe in a wheelchair, and then I was able to make it up to a walker.
Wow.
Standing up, and then to a cane, and then to, I guess, crutches first, and then to a cane. And then I had the cane for a while, and then
and just started
maybe 6-8 months, then no cane.
And did you just sort of explore your edges in terms of fitness, like what you could do, what felt right? I mean, it must have been a self-discovery there.
I remember, sitting in the wheelchair, and I owned a health club at the time when the accident happened. My partner had brought over some exercise equipment for me, some resistance bands and small dumbbells, and so I started in the wheelchair, just lifting 5-pound dumbbells.
Oh my God, 230-pound guy.
Yeah,
totally.
Going from 100-some pound dumbbells to 5-pound dumbbells. And,
that's amazing.
But just, doing what I could do and starting the recovery process. And then I was able to make it into the swimming pool eventually when I could stand up. And that helped a lot of the joint mobility.
And you went, I'd love if you could just kind of tick off some of you have just for the listener's sake, you have a world record, a junior IPA, I think it was called.
Yeah, junior IPA world record.
In bench press at the time, right? And then...
Yeah, I'd set that about a year and a half after the accident. I set that.
You set, wow. So a year and a half after this, a world record in June. And then you also, did you win your first bodybuilding competition you entered? Or?
No, I competed, which is pretty crazy. This exact same show that I was training for initially when the accident happened, I competed in that same show, I believe, the following year.
Wow.
Not at a level where I would be competitive to win, but
you were still gritty and in it.
Yeah.
Participating out of the gates like that.
Yeah.
What, and then did you go on to win? I remember you mentioned, I got to read a muscle and fitness feature on you that showed you standing on stage winning. I can't remember which competition, but it was only a handful of years after this.
Yeah. So in 1998, I went on and I competed in the Mr. Pennsylvania competition, and I ended up winning first place in the heavyweight division in 98. So
that's amazing.
That was pretty special to me. Yeah.
Yeah. What was it? Did you think of the accident when you were up there on stage? I mean, was that
Absolutely.
What was that like? Just like an overwhelming, joyous feeling? Or, I mean, I can't.
Yeah. You look down, and after something like that, I think I had 60 some staples put in my body, and many, many inches of scarring.
Yeah. And here you are
surgeries.
Fully naked. Like, yeah. I mean, well, all but naked, totally exposed to people. Yeah. Such a symbolic. What Was that an emotional thing for friends or family to witness at that time?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I'd love to hear, because it's one thing to hear a recollection, but also to be in the immediate presence of someone's life, kind of witnessing them go through that.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember correctly, you were also a trainer at that
Yes.
prior to the accident.
Yeah.
So you coached and encouraged people.
Sure.
What was that like? What did you, for other people to witness that, those years, the accident and the subsequent 2 or 3, 4 years after that?
I had a really good connection with people with medical issues that were coming for help and recovery, and ended up getting into doing post-rehab work at the time with people that were recovering from a stroke or a heart attack or
as a trainer in
Yes.
your own facility. Yeah.
And then once they learned about my story, then the amount of complaining they had about working out disappeared.
Diminished completely.
So,
did that up, like, what's the word, like compliance or trust in you? Like,
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, did it? I mean,
Yeah.
if you recommended or encouraged them, did you notice?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's almost like a dictum of, well, you see that across the board, like addiction recovery or financial failure and then renewal, entrepreneurship. If you're around someone who's got, there's like an authority in the voice.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of comes through.
Yeah.
I could see that it must have been a blessing for people
Yeah.
to be around that. And then tell me about the, how did this, you actually have a tattoo on it, like it was such a, it'll be interesting when you're a 90-something-year-old man, God willing, to like make sense of this lifetime of yours, you know, to look back. Like, but you actually tattooed the date 3/15/94. I don't know if it would be, if you could try to show it on that camera on the video there. Do you mind?
Sure.
Like pulling up?
Yeah.
This would be, so for those of you just listening, I'll describe this to you. Yeah, you can see it, hopefully. You can see it well. I think it comes through. So it's like a gorgeous phoenix, and then there's a date, 3/15/94, which was the date of the accident.
That was the date of the accident.
Yeah. So when did you get that tattoo? And that was years later, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably 6 years ago, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Something like that. It was many years later, and I wasn't really big into tattoos. Didn't like what they looked like many years down the road. And I knew if I had ever got one, it was going to be something that was very meaningful to me and symbolize something very important. And I thought that would be something good to see. When I looked in the mirror, it reminded me of that particular date when I basically, was reborn, or I had a chance to restart my life how I wanted to do it.
And that, I mean, it's even the way you contextualize that like that wheelchair moment that you mentioned, you see it as an opportunity to restart. It's like a re-opportunity at life.
Yep.
How did that, I think when we spoke earlier, I remember the question occurred to me, I don't know if we discussed it, but this idea that, what is the basic dictum? You're never given more than you can handle, kind of thing. Like this idea that, and having gone through one calamity, one difficulty, the lessons learned translate to multiple domains of life with all of its inevitable challenge, marriage, business. Like at 46,
yes.
At 46 years old, how do you, how can you see that expressing itself in your own life? Did it carry over into other things, or did you link the two cognitively? You know what I mean? Like business challenges or moving across the country, whatever other life challenges.
It has. It's funny you say moving across the country, because traveling is a big passion of mine, and my wife and I love to travel. And it's probably the biggest contributor to that. Is from my accident, I absolutely know there may not be a tomorrow.
Wow.
I know how quickly it can be taken away.
Interesting.
So getting to see and explore cultures.
Like today and now, like you don't waste time with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I never want to look back on something and say, oh, I wish I would have tried that, or I wonder what that would have been like. I'd rather try something and fail than have not tried it at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I constantly, whenever I have a hardship or something I'm struggling with, I can look back or even look in the mirror now at that Phoenix and think you have no right to be complaining about this little issue. And, I can deal with something like that.
Yeah.
Puts everything in perspective for me.
Proper perspective.
Yeah.
Just at a more of a, if you were to look back and if you could talk to yourself the times, I'm presuming you had some, maybe got impatient with the process or struggled or, you were resolute in your decision to recover. What would you tell your 22 and a day year old self? What would you tell your 22, 23-year-old self, knowing what you know now, having gone on to win bodybuilding championships? I mean, I don't have your resume in front of us, but Eric has won multiple competitions, set that junior bench press record, and world IPA. What would you tell yourself now in terms of encouragement, like your own self? Does that question have meaning? Like, and if you can't, locate an answer for your own self, I'm almost even thinking like, if we may have a listener right now who's been through a physical challenge, what words of encouragement, what key things, you may have already communicated them, but what would you want to convey to them or your old self?
Well, I think the most important thing is don't go by statistics. From my accident, I shouldn't have survived the accident to begin with. And
didn't the physician say in the whole history of the hospital
they had remembered one orthopedic accident that a person survived that was more severe than mine, and it was a gentleman that fell into a commercial trash compactor. And I think there was 200 some breaks in his body, and he survived it.
Survived it, yeah.
But just thinking about the 56,000 pounds on top of you, on top of an asphalt.
Yeah, it's incredible.
You
shouldn't be here.
Yeah, so.
So your perspective to give would be.
Yeah. You have to keep your mind in it. If you can accomplish anything you want, if your mind is allowing you to do that, you can handle more than what your body will handle more than what your mind will. So don't give up.
Yeah. So the barrier to physical recovery is often the mind.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can handle more than you think.
Just like a marathon runner, an ultra marathon runner, that your mind will break way before your body will.
Yeah, yeah. How about in terms of if someone's is there a level of persistent focus, but in terms of patience or I don't know, in terms that I would imagine I'd get a lot of people fall off the way because they. Well, to use a bodybuilding example, I once heard that's almost like a 12-year-old, going to his father and looking at the 21-year-old fit guy. He's like, "Dad, how do I?" Well, in due time, son. Like you can't, like it's not tomorrow, but
sure, yeah.
You're going to grow and mature, and you'll come into yourself. But did you have a struggle with impatience? Were you eager or did that fuel you in terms of?
Well, it's just being constant, and any percentage of improvement is still improvement. And I kept that, I just wanted to be a little bit better than I was the week before, a little bit better than the week before. And, there's always setbacks, but you just.
And you paid attention to that incremental change.
Sure. Yeah.
You track that. That's a big thing. A lot of people, I think, again, that applies to physical recovery, business, like to not underestimate the power of incremental.
Yeah.
But you have to put your awareness on it.
Yes.
You have to almost like the mind has to see I went up 2 pounds or whatever.
Yep.
The other piece, how would you say if you were to do anything different looking back? What occurs to you in terms of your own recovery or the way you manage that?
I would have done anything different?
Yeah, not post-accident. So.
Oh. I was going to say I probably would have gone to work that day.
Yeah, right. Well, is that true? Let me ask you that. Sort of, I don't want to be overly cliche, but a lot of this, I don't know if this is a rule or a dictum, but a lot of people are like, in retrospect, I wouldn't want to live through it again. I wouldn't wish it upon a friend, but I wouldn't take it back. Like,
yep.
How do you think about that or articulate that to your wife or friends? Or,
if I wouldn't have gone through that accident, I probably wouldn't live in Idaho. I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have had my son.
Yeah.
So in a way, it was kind of the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gave me a chance to start
Start again.
my new life. Yeah.
Yeah. And even today, you're pretty disciplined with fitness. Like you have a best friend you meet. What is it? 4:30 every morning or something?
4:30 in the
like,
morning.
What's
We
your,
train. Yeah.
you look for 46. You look, great. What's your routine now in terms of taking care of your body? And how is, you didn't have your hips replaced or your joints? I mean, your pelvis healed, right?
It did heal for many years. It did very, very well. Here, probably 4 years ago, I started developing a good amount of pain in my hip that I kind of dealt with and tried to rehab myself. But here last year, I went in and had a hip replacement done on the one side, which was I shouldn't have put it off as long as I did.
I hear that a lot. That
yes,
people will say that about the hip because they're so expert about it now. Like
it was. I had a phenomenal surgeon that helped me out as a fairly easy process. I mean, a major undertaking, but the pain was instantly gone. And
wow, yeah.
There's lots of people that I talk about that if you're dealing with the joint pain, and surgeons have brought that up to you about the joint replacement. Don't put it off.
Interesting. Yeah, just because it opens up activity again in your life.
Yeah,
and
it was affecting the quality of my life, and it was affecting people around me, and it wasn't fair to them, and it wasn't fair to me. So I got it done and recovered from that.
And then tell us a little bit about a couple domains to ask you about again. Your family and your current work. Yeah, like your current work and interests. Even on your family. So you have two. You have a stepson and a son.
Yep.
In the house, and how do you talk to them? What are their ages, and how do they even? I mean, a 4 or 5 year old doesn't get this stuff, but have you begun to share this story with them, or do they know it as part of your identity, kind of thing?
Yeah, I've talked to them about it a little bit. They don't understand the scope of it yet. They will someday, and but I've explained it to them.
The tattoo, or they could give a quick 12
they know
second
Daddy's
version.
Phoenix,
Yeah, Daddy's Phoenix.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So tell us what you're up to today and what your life looks like today.
Well, I've been doing canine behavior consulting for probably 7-8 years. I've been certified to do that, which I absolutely love. Love working with animals and helping people.
Yeah.
Fix these problems they're having with their canines, and and I've always been involved with building homes and renovations and just building anything. It's one of my passions.
Yeah.
I have a big wood shop that I build stuff out of reclaimed wine barrels. And
that's awesome. Yeah. You were fiddling. Our host, he was examining my wobbly table. His mind was already working on fixing it. So I wish I had that genetic trait. And then you're also real estate, right?
Yes, and everything kind of led me to getting involved with getting my real estate license. Building the homes and flipping houses. So last year I decided I'm going to get my license and help other people do that as well.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm focusing most of my time in on now, is doing my real estate.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I loved hearing your story originally, especially in the context. I've had a couple surgeries, ankle stuff, and I have such an empathy for people who encounter, especially a physical ailment young, tragically. You almost die, but in terms of the tragedy of that, and then you recovered, and I think, like listening to your story, just your mind was so resolute. And there was almost like a fight fierceness. That, at least those are the words I'd use listening to you. But I hope your story encourages other people.
I hope it does too.
I appreciate you sharing it.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.